Hello, my dearios. So, how you doing? Welcome to
Hello.
a special
Hello, everyone.
animal rights show. This is,
All animal rights shows are special, but this is special.
this is a special. It's a
Special,
bit weird.
special.
It's a show within the show, really. And the reason we've done it this way is that Andy Atkinson goes to work at about the time that we come on. Although today he's delayed it for a few minutes, so he can be here in the chat just for a few minutes. But yeah, I mean, I'm disgusted really. A vegan with a job.
I know, it's disgusting.
Yeah,
How dare you have a job?
I mean, what's going on there? Breaking all the stereotypes. So the way it's going to work is that we recorded a kind of director's conversation with Andy, and we broke it into 3 parts. So there's the first part of the film, then the first part of our reaction. And so what we're going to do is stop before part 2 and then address any of the issues that might come up in the chat. So we'll do that kind of 3 times. So comment away. As usual, of course, nobody's going to be charged for getting your comment on the screen. And the usual thing about the best place to watch this is on my YouTube channel, so you can see all the chat. Right, so I think that's about it, really. Shall we just get on with it then, folks?
So, should we mention that at the end of every one of the 3 parts, we're going to try to answer the questions in the chat. So probably.
Yeah, I thought I'd just done that.
Yes, but I mean, should we have a special way, write them down with a cue at the beginning or something, so we don't miss any of them?
Yeah, well, that's our job. Where we're watching through, we need to be monitoring the chat, and then anything that you want to bring up, then just make a note of the time, and then we'll do it that way.
Oh, Andy's here.
Oh, so he is.
Andy's here.
Do you want to do any kind of hellos, Wendy?
Okay, yep. Let's say hello. Well, we've got our special guest here. Andy's here for a while to watch along as we watch along, watching all of us along. It's literally quite surreal for us. This is. Well, we've got Philip here from New York. Philip, hello, comrade. Very much looking forward to the show. We've got Jeremy the Ape. Thanks for joining us, Jeremy. We've got the Spiritual Vegan. Hey, Jennifer, how are you doing? We've got lovely Deb and V, and I think that's all for now. But say hello if you're here and you want to.
Right, put that back. And for the live team, that's us now. If you were wondering, because otherwise you're gonna get 2 lots of us. So we're gonna take that out. But we should mute ourselves when it's playing, folks. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. All right then. So here we go. So we've got the opening yet again now.
Oh yeah.
Hey, Earthlings! Welcome to the technologically sophisticated animal rights show. So, we've had another couple of issues, but I think they've gone now. So this is a special, really. So welcome along to that. And as you can see, we have a special guest panelist, Andy Atkinson, and he's responsible for enhancing tens of videos from the Animal Rights Archive. And you can find them on Andy's YouTube channel, which is Andy Atkinson, not your mum, not your milk. I'm glad you changed that, actually, Andy, because there was quite a few of the same title getting in the way.
Yeah, there was a number of not your mum, not your milks, weren't there?
Yeah. So I'm glad you put your name first. That's good. One of the latest that Andy's done is a revitalization of the famous Tom Reagan opening speech from '88, the animal rights debate, which was on BBC TV and watched by 1 million people. And so what happened there is, with the aid of computer-generated voice, Andy was able to eliminate the irritating interruption from the chair took place in that, and so it's much clearer now, and it's just kind of Reagan all the time. Kind of Reagan was in full flow, and the guy was trying to stop him, and so Andy's taken that bit out. And he's also made a number of original videos, documentary style, and the last of which is what we're going to be featuring today. And also Andy is a huge presence on TikTok, a TikTok influencer. And so I know you wouldn't like that. So Andy, welcome.
Yeah, hey,
Andy, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
And just to say, we haven't got our lovely Nella with us today. She wasn't able to make it, but she'll make the show when we put this recording out on our usual slot on Monday. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, so it's a bit weird that we've got a show within a show for the first time, really. So
it is, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's a bit odd. But speaking of odd, let's see if I can get my technology right. First of all, we'll do that. And then, so it's called There's No Right Way to Do the Wrong Thing. So this is split now into 3 parts. So it's basically 10 minutes each, really. And then we're going to just show that through and then chat about each section at the end of it. So if we're ready to go, folks, I'll start. All right, here we go.
Before this film begins, we need a reminder of where this movement originated and what it has always truly been about. The word vegan was coined in 1944, in the middle of a world war, World War II, in fact, at a time of global violence, genocide, and mass injustice. And yet, amid all of that devastation, a handful of people chose to create the ultimate peace movement. They weren't trying to be popular. They weren't trying to win the next political campaign. They were trying to live without exploitation in any form. It wasn't just about food, and it wasn't just about health. It was a stance. It was a position. It was a philosophy. A stance against all exploitation. A position against the use of all others. And a philosophy for peace, for justice, for liberation, long before those words were common in social discourse. And yet, just like many movements, the history we remember isn't always complete. Though records suggest that Elsie Shrigley and Dorothy Morgan were central to coining the word vegan, it is always Donald Watson who is credited for it. Now, this isn't about blame. It is a reflection of something far deeper, of how the patriarchy echoes through history, even within movements meant to challenge this oppression. Veganism is not separate from any other justice movement. Simply, it unites where the others divide. It was born inside a world of war, and it stands against all forms of violence and tyranny. Just like the civil rights movement, just like the women's liberation movement, just like the fight for gay rights, indigenous rights, disability rights, trans rights, worker rights, and every other that has said, no more, not in my name. Veganism belongs in that lineage, not just as a cause, but as a commitment, as a refusal to participate in any system that devalues, dominates, or exploits anyone else. This is a film for those who feel and understand that, or those who are willing to, for those who know that silence helps only the oppressor, and who are ready to speak out against them. Because veganism is not a niche issue. It is the greatest social justice movement the world has ever seen, the most far-reaching, inclusive, and necessary one the world has ever known. And with that clarity, Let us begin. There is no right way to do the wrong thing. Section 1. Clarifying the movement. Veganism is not a diet. It's not a trend. It's not a personal choice among many. Veganism is a stance against all injustice, a stance against the use of all sentient life, whether that's for food, for fashion, for entertainment, for experiments, for any purpose. Wherever other animals are used, rights are violated. No exceptions, no excuses. Does a farm keep animals? That's a rights violation. Does a laboratory imprison them? That's a rights violation. Does a zoo display them behind glass or bars? That too is a rights violation. It does not matter whether the cages are small or large. It does not matter whether the treatment is gentle or rough. What matters is that they are used without consent, their freedoms taken, their bodies owned, their lives controlled. There is no right way to do the wrong thing, and all use of other animals in any form is always wrong. But this stance does not stop at our fellow animals, because veganism is part of a greater fight, a fight against all oppression in all of its variations, whether it is based on species, race, sex, ability, class, or any other line drawn to divide and dominate. Oppression is oppression. Injustice is injustice, and veganism rejects all of it. Because we do not oppose just some discrimination. We oppose all discrimination. We do not redraw arbitrary lines. We shatter them. We say no cage, no chain, no wall, no whip for anyone. This is not about better treatment. This is about ending use, ending ownership, ending the idea that any sentient being can be reduced to property, to product, to a tool, or a thing. Veganism is not the ceiling, it is the floor, it is the starting point, not the end, and justice is the goal. Liberation is the demand. This film is for those who are ready to take that stance, for those ready to reject use, not just reduce harm, for those ready to stop asking how to do better and start saying instead, this must stop immediately, entirely. There is no right way to do the wrong thing. Go vegan, be vegan, stand for justice, stand for liberation, stand for something. Section 2. Universal rights violations. Across every corner of the world, other animals are used, and wherever they are used, their rights are denied. It doesn't matter if it's a global empire or a backyard shed, a gleaming laboratory or a rundown roadside stall, one person in the woods or a billion-dollar brand. All use is a rights violation. Always. We kill them for their flesh. We exploit them for their milk, for their eggs or honey. Marine life are pulled from the sea, trapped, suffocated, ground alive, their bodies turned into products. Their exploitation is hidden behind words like natural, humane, and sustainable. They are skinned for fashion. Their fur is ripped out, their hides tanned. Wool is torn from sheep, feathers from birds, over and over. Silkworms are boiled alive simply to make thread. All of it is labelled luxury, often labelled cruelty-free. Other animals are forced to perform for us. Elephants beaten into submission, tigers and orcas turned into entertainers, horses are whipped to exhaustion, then discarded, bulls stabbed and then let loose in arenas to be killed by a matador. Dogs and birds are made to fight, for bets, for blood, for fun. We experiment on other animals, mice, rats, rabbits and monkeys locked in cold metal boxes, cats poisoned, dogs dissected, even the fish, who many claim don't even feel, are still tested on, their lives reduced to data points, to numbers on a page. If the moral implication wasn't bad enough, this data isn't even reliably transferable and has a very high failure rate when utilised in human trials. They are made to do our labour. Donkeys and camels breaking under tourist loads, horses bound to carriages in heavy traffic, elephants trained with pain and used like machines. Their strength is taken. Their will is ignored. We breed and sell them, whether those dogs in mills, birds in cages, or cats in your next door neighbour's living room. Reptiles and other exotic animals are brought, traded and confined, their instincts erased, their natural nature crushed, all for companionship. No, all for profit. And this is not rare. This is not the extreme or the exception. This is normality, or at least the normality we have allowed to come into fruition. And it is important that we recognise that even if all of those treatments above were better, all of those standards above were perfect, it would change nothing about the fundamental wrong. These animals are unable to consent to us. They are unable to give us permission. Everything that we do to them, therefore, is a rights violation. This is unavoidable. This is not about size. This is not about scale. It is about principle. If other animals are used, then their rights are violated, whether that's in a backyard or a global empire, whether it's for food, for fashion, fun, science, or even companionship. It is a rights violation. So what is a rights violation? It's basically an infringement on someone else's freedom. It's not just pain. It's not just suffering. It's using someone without their consent for your own benefit. And if we were to put this in a number of examples, would we accept it if it were done to another human? If a child were taken and raised for her milk, would we call that humane? If someone was killed just because we liked the taste of them, would we still call that a personal choice? If a person was kept behind glass in a zoo or bred and sold in a pet store, would we still call that entertainment or companionship? The answer is clear, no, and even a child would know it. If it's not okay to do it to a human, then it's not okay to do it to someone else. That's what rights means. It means that your body is your own, that your freedom is your own. Your life is not for sale, not for show, not for someone else to take or make decisions regarding. And other animals feel. Other animals think. Other animals resist. Other animals want to live. They are not just products. They are not tools. And they are definitely not things. All use is a rights violation. All ownership is exploitation. All exploitation is oppression. There is no kind way to own somebody else. There is no gentle way to steal someone else's freedom. There is no right way to do the wrong thing.
We know what it feels like to be used, to have our rights denied, our bodies controlled, our futures decided for us, our voices silenced, what it's like to be victims. We understand that commonality. That's why we speak for them.
Right. So that's your part one. Powerful start, Andy. There's no doubt.
I didn't realise until I just listened back to some of that with like these headphones in, how much you can hear the dog snoring in the background.
Well, I think that adds to it, if anything.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not moaning about it. It does add some sort of like realism to it. But because my usual headphones that I use are these ones, you see, and they don't give you that same sort of like, I could hear every snore.
Powerful stuff, Andy. Really powerful. Your use of language, and I love the contrast of the images of our fellow animals. So all the things that you're saying about their oppression
and the injustice and the violations, but the contrast with seeing fellow animals, in their, maybe not always in their natural environment, because some of them obviously they've got the ear tags on and things like that, but just to see them and their personalities shine through, and their connection with their family or their friends on some of those videos. So I really love that juxtaposition that you made with that. But just to kind of have an overarching question, what was the purpose and the motivation to making this particular film and this particular focus?
So that's a really good entryway into the motivation behind the film as well. Essentially, it was not only to try and focus on the importance and the significance of language and how important it is to talk about things like oppression and exploitation as opposed to their treatment, but also the reliance that I suppose we have on footage which is considered graphic or not too comfortable to watch. When in reality, it's the words, it's the things that we're describing that are the powerful things. It's the oppression of someone else. Do we need to see them suffering to kind of like give that contrast, or is the words enough? And I think that the words are enough. And it really emphasizes the point that no one needs to be, I suppose, put off by the idea of watching anything graphic. Most people don't enjoy watching that kind of thing anyway. And so by watching this film, not only have you not got the graphic, I suppose, imagery, but the language is kind of like, why would this be okay? Whereas, and I don't want to criticize films like Dominion by any means, but obviously the graphic footage is there, but then the language is like, look how cruel this is. So automatically people are thinking, yeah, we're talking about treatment. We're being shown treatment. So in my brain, the solution to this problem is better treatment. Well, I would like to think that you can't come to that conclusion from watching my film, because there's no treatment being shown and the language isn't talking about improving their welfare or their treatment. It's about abolition. It's about the end of exploitation. So I suppose those were the real key components that I wanted to move away from. And also I think it's important to mention too, that in the age of technology that we have, it's so easy these days to replicate things using AI. That the more of our footage which is focused around how animals are treated, the more that we've then got our evidence whether that's true or not. I don't need to do that. We know that animals are kept in farms. We know they're kept in laboratories. We know that they're kept in these places. And so for as long as that occurs, rights violations are happening. And that's the important thing that we should focus on.
I doubt anyone could finish watching your film and then talk about, what's this film about? Oh, it's about animal cruelty. If they do, then that just goes to show the power of the welfarist,
yes, absolutely,
culture that we are living in. So, but I wouldn't.
I don't think that. Yeah, I was going to say I'd be really, really optimistic if there was nobody that did say that afterwards, because I do think that is the power of the conditioning that exists, or cultural speciesism, because people do that already. I mean, I've been stood before, literally, where we've got signs either side that will say end animal use. And someone will go, oh, yeah, they're the vegetarians. They don't eat meat. And it's like, everything here is clear. But the opinion is those are the vegetarians, not vegans. And they do it because they don't eat flesh. So all of this messaging that we've got, they've not even paid any attention to. The cultural speciesism has answered the question.
Yeah. They see what they're expecting to see. And hear what they're expecting to hear, I suppose, isn't it? If they're not really listening. So
but that raises that sociological issue that you both raised just then, is the fact that culture is so important, but also so powerful. And a lot of what our movement does is culturally incoherent, or it doesn't take into account the depth of what we're dealing with. And I think part of that is because, we're dealing with individuals who are broken free from their culture, but that impedes their recognition of how for other people it's much more difficult. Think I've done it, so therefore, and on the done it thing, right at the beginning, you raised something, when you were putting everything into a historical context and the war years and all that, you raised something that you've talked about in the past, which is, well, look at what they did then. If they could do it then, what's stopping people now? It's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah. And obviously I know that there wasn't the things of social media, and there wasn't some of the other social pressures that may exist now. But obviously, just in terms of the information that they had, It's not like they could have just literally pulled their phone out and said, hang on a minute, can I get everything I need from a plant-based diet? They didn't know the answers. And even if they'd have gone and spoken to the professionals, what answers would they have been given? You cannot do this. You have to consume these products or you're going to die. And so, I just think it's incredibly inspirational that quite often now I'll hear conversations where people go, yeah, but we've only got 8 different types of milk. I'm like, they had none. They had none. That wasn't the motivation of why they did it. It was the injustice was the motivation. And that should be our motivation. If we've got 20 types of milk now, brilliant. But that's not the reason to do this. It's just a privilege or a benefit. And so I think it's really important to focus on the why. Yeah. And I mean, obviously, we've had these conversations outside of this in the past. If you can get someone to connect with the why, the chances of them leaving this movement or having an epiphany moment where they realize that animal use is okay again is significantly reduced. Whereas if you bring them in and think this is something about welfare, which could, in theory, be improved, well, then there's a chance one day they're going to be happy with what's going on and they're going to leave anyway. So I just think it makes a big difference to get them to understand what we're against and why.
I think you used the word there, privilege, I think, and going back to the whole era of the Second World War, I think, and going back to the whole theme of culture and socialization, I think out of the war came a lot of positives in a way that we saw a lot more community-based action, people rallying around each other, supporting each other. And obviously, the vegan pioneers, they were reacting to their environment and this lived experience of the war, because now we look back, it's something historical. We're looking at the war, this happened, we take it for granted that it happened and it's a historical thing. That was their real life experience. They were living through it. And I think that does shape who we are, our life experience. And I think obviously what they were doing was born out of that. Whereas now I think because we're not, well, especially maybe in this country at the moment, in the UK where I am, obviously other people watching and have being in different situations, but I think we're in a very different political and experience of life sociologically as well, where we're not being driven to look at these things in the same way. So it does come from a place of privilege. I've heard vegans say the same thing. They're in a restaurant that is all vegan friendly food and they'll be moaning that there's the options there are not quite satisfying. And I'm literally looking still with my jaw on the floor thinking that I can eat everything on the menu, because that is such a still relatively new thing for me, and didn't used to be the case. So I think there's been a real shift in mindset in terms of politically, the sense of privilege. I think individualism as well, because if you look back at the pioneers, there was a very much a collective feeling. And I think maybe that was born out of the war as well, in that people did come together more and there was more of a community or collective sort of mindset or commonality that we don't seem to have right now. Everything seems so divided, so polarized and so individualized. And so it does, you really look at things and think, actually, could it be like this now? I don't know.
No, I think those are really good points. But yeah, I think it also kind of highlights, we still very often get questions that are like, why are you talking about this whilst, for example, what's going on in Gaza is happening? Can you imagine them back in 1944 saying, yeah, we're just going to have a meeting to discuss what's going on? They're going, there's a war going on. What are you thinking about even discussing this? And they're like, because it's bigger than everything. Because this is more important. Because potentially this idea that we're envisaging, and I'm talking about the founders here as opposed to the three of us, is so big and so enormous that it can cure all of this crap that's surrounding us. So, yeah, it is more important than having a conversation about which air raid shelter we're going to use or where our rations are coming from, because this is something that we see as an active solution to all of the world's injustice. And nobody else is having that conversation, are they? Even Winston Churchill wasn't having that conversation at that point. Only those group of vegans were having a conversation about how can we bring an end to all oppression. And I just think that's incredible to even think about, let alone the fact that they said, I don't care what everyone else says. I don't care what my family do. We're going to do this because it's the right thing to do. And no matter how much pushback there is, no matter how much pressure there is, we're going to do it because it's the right thing to do. And if they hadn't, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So, like,
it was very inspiring,
Absolutely.
definitely very inspiring to think about. I'd love to be able to get into their minds for a moment and, you know, what was it like for them? What were their experiences, and how was it? What was the pushback like? And, you know, what was their kind of, what did they have to kind of, how do they have to show up every day in order to embody those values and start to kind of, you know, grow this movement? So yeah, it's very, very inspiring for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. No, those are the conversations I'd really like to have as well. It'd be so nice to just think, you know, the first time that this came up, and obviously you'd have had your own individual pushback, like, what am I thinking? That's I mean, how do we bottle that kind of motivation? Because that's what we need more of now, that no matter what, even though it's going to be hard, even though it's going to be difficult, even though you know there's going to be challenges, you say, I'm going to do this because it's the right thing to do and nothing's going to stop me. Yeah, we need far more of that attitude. We don't have enough of that now.
Yeah, going back to what you just said about big and the bigness of it all, Andy, do you think that you might get pushback that you're presenting a type of veganism which is just too big, and that a lot of people are going to be put off by that fact itself?
I mean, possibly, but I suppose, would anyone say that the idea of peace is too big for the average person and therefore we should avoid using it because the idea of peace is too big for anyone to understand? I don't think that's the case in any way, shape or form. I think what people should probably stop doing is deciding whether people are capable of understanding information for them before they've given them the chance to understand that information. It's probably a bit arrogant of you to make the decision on someone else's behalf and whether you think they're sophisticated enough to understand this. Maybe if you don't understand it, you shouldn't use that as a reason to assume someone else won't. Just give them the information and see what they do with it. I think that's our problem. We do this all the time. This is too big. Let's make it weaker. Well, let's just give it to them as it is. And if it is too big, then we can always break it down into smaller bits. But if we do that before we've given it to them, then we're not telling them the truth. And I think that that's an error.
And also, just on that, if we don't portray the bigness, for want of another word, how huge it actually is, or the scope of the goals and the aims of veganism, then it's not veganism.
Exactly. Yeah.
I would say.
I was just getting to the fact that some people would probably say, well, that's too utopian. We can't sell that, because that, unfortunately, is another way that a lot of the movement think, what can we sell to people?
Yeah, again, that would be where the criticism or the pushback comes back and say, yeah, well, we're not a business. We're not looking to market. What we're trying to sell to people is justice and peace. And so, yeah, they need to know the information and they need to know the truth. And if you've got a problem with that, then it's you that's the actual problem. It's a problem with how you give this information to people. And I know people don't like that criticism, but it's true. Because they are sophisticated enough to understand injustice, they are sophisticated enough to understand peace, and they are sophisticated enough to understand rights. It's just that we make the decision that they're not. And I think that's just comes from a place of arrogance for the most part. And if you're deciding that someone isn't sophisticated enough to understand this, or this idea is too big, it's a you problem. It's not a veganism problem. It's a you problem.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Because again, just to go back to our founders, though, quickly, we're talking about like a dozen people that knew none of this information, had none of this technology, had none of these privileges that we have, and they weren't scared to sell this big idea to people around them that were struggling with a world war. So if we think it's too big in 2025, it's a you problem.
Right. Okay. So now we're moving to. Right, so this is us now.
This is quite surreal, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Like I've gone into like the Twilight Zone or something.
Well, especially if you put that screen up, that's surreal, isn't it? Look at that. So, okay. So, did we see anything that we want to briefly talk about? I saw something from Dennis 622, I think it was. That one there.
I feel that our audience really liked the film so far.
Yeah, some really great comments. This one from Ronnie. Hey, Ronnie, by the way. Sadly, the words Andy used to describe the world at the time of World War II are still the same today. Yeah, very sad, isn't it? But very true. Very true, Ronnie.
Indeed, we seem to be moving towards World War III, don't we? Philip said that one. This is a nice comment.
Oh, yeah, I've had that on my list as well.
You do, yeah. I got one more after this. So it'd be interesting to see if it's the same one.
Where was mine? Was 0632, I think. Oh no, I think I already did that. I think I put it up anyway, which was the saying the ultimate boots movement.
Oh right, okay. And I've got another one from Deb. That's right. So, okay. All right. So once again, folks, we're going to do the same routine. We're going to
before you go on. There is a question from Jeremy in the chat.
Is there?
Jeremy the 8th. Where is? Do you know what time that was? That. Okay. There it is. Do you think the treatment versus use issue is getting better or getting worse? And what can we do as individuals to shift the focus to abolition? Great question, Jeremy the 8th. What does everyone think of that? Do you know what? It's funny because I think I see both. I see places where I see there are a lot more people talking about abolition, using the language that we're using today. And I go to events where there are talks given, speeches given, where people are talking about language and talking about abolition and talking about not using cruelty, abuse, and staying in the treatment and welfare messaging. And then you also see kind of the bigger organizations. I think I see more improvement in the grassroots, but in the bigger organizations, I think they are still very much in cruelty, abuse, especially the big organizing, organizing big protests and the placards, and there's still a lot of that kind of messaging out there as well. So I think both is what my view would be. What about you two?
Yeah, I agree with you, Wendy. And the thing is, sometimes when I give a speech about language, for example, when I'm invited somewhere or there is, discussion about language, everyone agrees that this is the right path. And then the next day, very often I hear the same people using, welfare language. So I'm not sure that this is intentional, but it's, embedded so much in our minds. I don't know, or if they think that they need to use it in order to approach someone and then express the idea of non-use. And I'm not sure what's happening, but I definitely see both. It's very confusing, and often I see both from the same people, and this is even more confusing.
Yeah, well, consistency is not our thing sometimes. But put my kind of sociology hat on. I have noticed. I had a conversation with Andy in the middle of the week about this. I have noticed in the coverage of Gaza, and also in the coverage of what's going on with Trump and his Gestapo and all that a lot of the podcast media are starting to use the word cruel. What Israel is doing is cruel, and what Trump is doing is cruel. Now, normally, we normally talk about human rights abuses and stuff, but they've started to introduce the cruelty language, which might, funny enough, be a reverse of our position. They might actually think we need to bring some emotion, connect people, especially with Gaza. We need to connect, because obviously the Palestinians have been animalized. They've been called human animals and this kind of stuff. And so I think that they're using more emotive language as they see it to do that, which is a really kind of interesting kind of thing. We could have a whole seminar on that one, but I have noticed that anyway. Right. Okay. So who put that back up? That'll have been you, Wendy. I took it
So
down.
sorry. Oh, you took it out. I wasn't sure if I did it by accident, so I put it back up again. But I was just going to the end of that question though. Is what
No,
can we
I'm
do?
going to take it back down again.
Is what can we do as individuals to shift the focus to abolition? And I just think exactly what we're doing here today, like Andy's film, us discussing it, spreading the ripple effect. You know, there are people here in the chat who are doing excellent work out there advocating with this language. Amelia's book, you know, Jeremy's videos and posts from Respect Sanctuary, Philip's work out there advocating for anti-speciesism, you know, Deb's work, all of us in here, I'm sure, and I'm not mentioning everyone, but I'm sure you're all doing amazing stuff as well. Dennis's work, I think we're all spreading the word in our own way in different formats and platforming it in different ways, and I think that will have a ripple effect. I feel that even, you know, like Nella was saying, she's invited to give talks on language. That's going to have a ripple effect. I'm invited for similar things, and I can hear people picking up that language. You know, and I've noticed so many more people saying our fellow animals, and I hear it and I think, oh, this is lovely. So I think we just keep doing what we're doing as well.
Yeah, you do make a similar point when we come to the next lot of
oh, do I? Oh, I'm so predictable.
You do. I didn't want to stop you in full flow. So okay, so we're back to the film. So let's go to part 2 then, folks.
Section 3. Why reform is not justice. They tell us things are changing. They tell us the conditions are improving. They say the cages are bigger now. The slaughter is more humane now. The animals get more time outside now. Then they'll point to their labels: cage-free, free-range, grass-fed, organic. But we must ask, is a bigger prison still a prison? If the walls are all painted nicely and the floors are carpeted, does that change what it is? If the door is left open but you still can't leave, are you free? Let's put this more simply. If someone is still being owned, still being controlled, still being used, that is still always a violation. A warm prison doesn't stop being a prison. A kind owner doesn't stop being an owner. And killing someone gently is still killing. Imagine someone said, I don't beat my dog. I just sell her puppies. Would we call that compassionate? Or would we ask why she's being bred and the puppies sold at all? Imagine someone else said, I don't hit my horse. I just ride him for fun. Would we call that ethical, even though the horse has no say? If the victim is unaware, is it still a killing? If the execution is quick, is it still an execution? If we smile whilst we're doing it, does that make it just? These labels are not just for the other animals. They're for the humans. They're there for our comfort. They exist to ease and appease guilt, not to stop violence. Justice is not comfort. Justice is not less harm. Justice is not improved oppression. Justice is freedom. Justice is the absence of oppression. People say humane slaughter, but that's an oxymoron. There's no such thing, because there is no humane way to kill someone who does not want to die. Those are the facts, and it would never change with better lighting or with softer hands. And this is why veganism is not about better farms, not about cleaner slaughterhouses, not about higher welfare. It is about ending use itself, ending exploitation itself, ending the lie that violence can be done nicely, because empty cages, not comfortable ones, are the goal. Freedom and not free range is the goal. Liberation and not regulation is the goal. There is no reform that makes injustice just. There is no version of violence that becomes kindness. There is no right way to do the wrong thing. Section 4. The language of use. Language shapes our world. It shapes how we speak. It shapes how we think. And if your language is limited, thus your thinking is limited. Words are not neutral. Words are carriers of values. They can reveal injustice or they can hide it. And when it comes to our fellow animals, our language has been carefully shaped to hide this truth, to make violence sound normal, to make exploitation sound reasonable, to make living beings sound like things. People say livestock, but what they mean is sentient life. People say product, but what they mean is someone else's body or bodily fluids. People say it, but what they are talking about is a someone. That one word, it, instantly turns a sentient life into an object. Not a person, not an individual, just a thing. But when they say instead of it, when we say someone instead of something, we bring them back into view. We restore their presence. We remind ourselves that this being exists. This being matters. That's why a hunter would say, I harvest it for food. I'm grateful for its sacrifice. But if we speak honestly, we'd say, as a killer, I took the life of someone who did not want to die. They did not offer their life to me. It was not a gift. I stole it. Changing simply a few words exposes the entire illusion of this oppression.
They call women cows to mock our bodies, to devalue us, or rats to make us seem unclean, untrustworthy, dogs, bitches, snakes, pigs. The insults are so often the names of other animals. As it is established already, they are beneath them, and that's how they want you to feel too. It's always derogative, always objective, always the same. That's not random. It's the language of power and the power of language, repeated by a culture that is taught to be speciesist, taught to discriminate or subjugate out of fear, desire, ignorance, or malice. But that curse can be cured. Those lies can be doused with truth, and these many wrongs can be righted. We hold the power. We just have to demand that instead.
People will say harvest, but they mean killing. People will say processing, but they mean dismembering. They say meat, but they mean body part. They say dairy, but they mean stolen baby calf milk. They say animal abuser, but what do they mean? To most people, that's someone who punches a cow or kicks a dog. So when a high welfare dairy farmer gently milks a cow, they don't feel called out by that, because they think cruelty is about the how and not what they do. This is where we go wrong, because when we use the oppressor's words, we fight using their rules, and that means only they win. They own the board. To the average person, cruelty means something extreme, something unnecessary. They don't see routine use as cruel. They see it as normality. So when we chant, stop animal cruelty, they think, I agree. That's why I buy free-range eggs. See, use is the problem. Not just the pain. Not just the method. Use. Ownership. Exploitation. The rights violation. Not the violation of comfort. So we must stop arguing over these definitions and instead just start using different words. Stronger words. Words with more conviction. And then there's how we speak about each other. We call people rats. We call them pigs. We call them dogs, snakes, vultures. Why? It's because we've already been trained to see those animals as beneath us, as dirty, selfish, violent, lesser. It's not an accident. It's conditioning. It's programming. We call someone a love rat when they're unfaithful in a relationship, even though rats often mate for life. We insult people by calling them what we already oppress. It's speciesism, internalized and then weaponized. This is how injustice spreads. This is how injustice perpetuates. Through words, through stories, through jokes, through the quiet, constant repetition of ideas that may seem harmless, but they shape how we think, and they shape how we treat others. But we can rewrite all of this. That's the beauty of language. We can change the way that we speak, and we can edit the way that we type. We can stop hiding violence behind soft words and labels. We can stop using the language of power and domination, and instead start using the language of truth and liberation. When we change our words, we automatically change our thoughts. And when we change our thoughts, we change the world. So let us speak up loudly for them, but let us speak clearly and succinctly, and let our language be the first act of liberation.
You cannot ever truly talk about freedom whilst rights are still denied. Until they are acknowledged, recognized, and respected, real freedom is just an idea. This requires far more than a change of legislation. It needs a shift in our mentality, an evolution in how we think, and so that we naturally extend where we show respect and by virtue who we consider. Until then, all we will ever do is give oppression and exploitation new names and industries.
Right, there we go. So that's your part 2. Again, powerful stuff, I think. You're muted, Wendy.
I did it again. I said, I think we should be getting some vegan ice cream coming round right about now for the interval.
Well, Roger didn't put the slide in there, so we haven't been kind of like manipulated into going to buy ice cream, have we?
Yeah, I never thought of it, but well, I've still got the editing of this to do, so I could.
Yeah, that's it. Make sure you took one in.
And look at this. Look who we have now. Nella arrived, everyone.
Yay, Nella.
Finally here. Hello, everyone. I've missed part 1. I really liked part 2, especially the part about language. And I think it was a really nice idea to include it in the film. And I think that the movement does not pay enough attention to the language we use. Although most movements know that language reflects societal biases, our movement tends to forget the importance of language and how it can be used as a political tool. And the bottom line is that since language carries and reflects all these prejudices and biases of our society, and that means it carries speciesism and reflects speciesism, we cannot challenge those biases by using the same language the oppressor uses. So one of the simplest things I believe we can do is change our language. So I'm really glad, Andy, you included language.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. Yeah, I mean, we talk to people all the time who are like, well, I haven't necessarily got the confidence to do this, or maybe I'm not able to go and do this activism. Every single person can change their language. Everybody can make those simple changes, even when we're just referring to other animals, for example. When you call them it, and then all of a sudden correct yourself and say, sorry, I mean someone, they all of a sudden exist. And it makes such a difference when you're having a conversation with someone about an individual as opposed to an object. And just changing that one word creates that. It takes the illusion away that they're not an object. They're a sentient being that we've erased from this equation, basically. And by calling them someone, we brought them back into the equation, and we have to deal with them now. They're there. They're like the presence is there. It's no longer just being hidden, is it? And I do think that that's something that everybody can work on. Obviously, there are certain limitations that affect whether you can go and do this or whether you can get involved in that. Everybody can change their language. Everybody can make effort to amend some of the things that they already say. And let's be honest, most of these phrases and slogans we know. I mean, the most common one that most people use is "There's no excuse for animal abuse." Just change one word. No excuse for animal use. And all of a sudden, the strength of that slogan or that branding is massive. And all you've done is take 2 letters away. So, yeah, I think sometimes we underestimate the individual power of each of us just by using different language. Absolutely.
Yeah, and often, because I totally agree with what you both said, and in the talk I gave on Sunday at the memorial service, I was really, I was at the end, so I came after everyone else's speeches, but in fact there were at least 2 or 3 people ahead of me who are now starting to talk about this as well. Like a couple of them included language in their talks, and solidarity and all these things that we talk about, and I was so delighted to hear that, and I kept saying, oh wow, other people are now starting to say these things and use different language and say how important the language is, and it's lovely to see this like ripple effect, because also, and that's something that I was brought attention to, is that it's something so simple. Like we've all got this tool in our toolkit every day, really, and whether it's activism or in daily conversations, you can modify what you're saying and just break. I often think of it as like a trance breaker, because often you say a word and people are not expecting it, and they kind of look at you, and like sometimes I'll say the person at home or the people at home, and then I'll say by people I mean the cats, and it's like, oh, people will look at me like but I'm just putting those in all the time, just little things. And obviously when people are saying, are you Dylan's owner, I'm like, there's no way that I own Dylan. Like I'm his. If anything, he probably owns me. But no, it's more like, I'm a companion to him. He lives with me. Is a refugee, is a resident. I care for him, or he's my family member. All of those things, whatever we want to say, but you can immediately put someone straight about that you're not their owner and things like that. So yeah, just in everyday life, just finding those opportunities. So I really agree. I loved that part as well. I loved that you included the language and spoke about that so powerfully.
Do you think that perhaps part of the problem with language is that in our movement, the people that belong in the movement do not see it as a movement? Because I cannot not wonder why we don't look at other movements and see how they use language as a political tool. Why we don't look at the feminist movement, for example? Why we don't look to any other movement and see what they do, and then reflect on that and decide to use the same strategies or similar strategies in our movement? It almost feels that the people in the movement do not realize that this is a social change movement. That this is not, this is not just about love, about kindness. It's not spiritual. It's not lifestyle. That this is a social movement.
No, I think you're absolutely right, and I do think that's part of the problem. For a social justice movement, we're neither focused on justice or at all social. We are very much a sort of diet against cruelty kind of organisation, aren't we? And very much when you see vegans talking, they sound like they are a member of the RSPCA or one of those extended groups. They don't speak like activists. They don't speak like people who are part of a social justice movement that's striving for world change. They speak like the representative of a charity that's looking to improve the conditions of X species. Yeah, and I think that's such a significant difference, because we don't observe the language of oppression or the language of tyranny or any of these things. We don't look at systematic oppression and think, right, how can we challenge this at a base level? I mean, look at many of our campaigns. They're single issue and they're focused on treatment. Neither of them look at the actual principles that we're supposed to be abolishing or bringing into order, for example. We don't act like that. And whenever you try and have these conversations, you're quite often told, well, hang on a minute, veganism doesn't do that. Or we need to focus on this particular injustice instead of this particular injustice. When again, going back to our founders, they looked at all of this and said, right, everything that we currently oppose, whether it's the animals that we're eating, the other animals that we're wearing, whether it's the human on human conflict, whether it's famine, whether it's genocide, all of these things, we've come up with something that can potentially cure or solve all of them. And it's veganism. Let's focus our time and energy on that. Yes, we could look at this, you could look at this. These are all individual things that are going to get us so far. But veganism, that's that one big encompassing thing that's just going to take everything at once. That's where our time and energy goes. And we have some people within our movement that seem to grasp that, but then at the same time go, but that's massive. Let's bring it down to something small so that people can understand it. What better would people want to understand than we know something that can cure all injustice? We know something that, you know, that discrimination, you know, that prejudice, you know, that violence. We know the cure for all of it, not just the one that's going to help this particular marginalised group, or not just the one that's going to help this particular species. We know the cure for all of it. Why wouldn't we want to sell that message? All of these things that you're concerned about, whether it's Gaza, whether it's chickens, whether it's fish, yeah, we know the cure for all of them. Why would you want to reduce that down and say, yeah, we know how to help fish? You just want to say we can cure these things. And I don't know what's scary about that. I don't know what's sophisticated about that. I don't know what's...
Well, let me take up on that, because that's the first question that I wrote down. Well, I actually wrote down about language, but we've covered that because we always talk about language. Wendy sees progress. I was wondering whether you do, but in terms of what you've just said, you know, about ending injustice, why we wouldn't want to put that message, I think a lot of people would reply, come on, Andy, be realistic. So how do you respond to that?
I am being realistic. Do we want to end injustice or not? Do we want to end oppression or not? So those are the things that we should be talking about. The more that we reduce this into, well, first of all, let's focus our time on making sure the hens are no longer in cages. Everyone else is still being oppressed. That's not on pause whilst we focus our time on MBR beagles. It's not like everyone else is just waiting for that to happen. They're all being oppressed whilst you're focusing on that. So yeah, I am being realistic. The only thing that we need to do is focus on all of this at once and do something about it, all of this at once. Of course, we're limited in the terms that we're individuals, but collectively in terms of our framework, it should be anti-oppression. It should be anti-injustice. It should be anti-exploitation, not anti what happens to X in X. And so I think that's our biggest fault. Why are people constantly saying we can't be actively opposed to all injustice? Why can't we? We are most of the time when it comes to other things. We're just not consistent. Well, I'm asking you to be consistent.
I suppose just as a little different perspective on that, I suppose even within the vegan movement, animal rights movement, we can still be in solidarity with different individuals. Like I suppose even in the women's liberation, women's rights movement, there are still going to be different avenues that you can go down, like whether it's votes for women, or we're looking at abortion rights, or we're looking at rights to education. There are still there are issues within women's liberation that we can also focus on, I'd say. So do you not think that's the same in the animal rights movement, that we can actually have an all-encompassing principle, which I think is the main important point that you're making, is that we haven't at the moment got that overarching principle and a consistency in our language and how we talk about it. But can we not still focus in solidarity with certain areas of oppression that are happening?
Yeah, as long as people do recognise that the overarching goal is the overarching goal, I think that's the part that has to change right now. There is nothing wrong with people doing their individual things. Like if you're very focused on the environment, that's your expertise. It'd be silly for me to say, stop talking about the environment and go and quote Tom Reagan. That's not your area, right? Of course you want to talk about environment. But if you recognise that the overarching goal is that we are trying to end all oppression, not just make the environment better, then that completely changes the framework of how you do this and how people receive the information. That's the part that has to change, yeah. I would never try and say, stop doing this, stop getting involved in that, stop doing this, or stop petitioning. None of those things have to change. It's the overarching goal that needs to be talked about. Hey, this is what veganism means. This is what we're trying to achieve. I, as an individual, will prefer to focus on this because this is where I think that my expertise is best utilised. That's all that has to change about that conversation. And I mean, our big name influencers could all do this too. I like to talk and use this particular language. However, veganism actually means this. This is the over-encompassing message, and I purposely dilute it down because I don't think that my audience is sophisticated enough to understand it. I know they're never going to admit to that, but that would go a long way, as opposed to telling them, this is what veganism is. Ignore all of that stuff. because that's what we have right now. We don't have an overarching message that everyone's consistent with. We have lots of competing little organizations that say, hey, I want a piece of your money, so listen to me instead of them. That's what has to change. And until it does, we are just going to keep going in all these different directions because there's too much of that. And there isn't an overarching message. If we went and spoke to 50 animal rights activists today, do you think they'd all tell me the same definition? I think they'd all give me the same version or the same motivation. No, they'd all tell me something different. And that's the part that has to change. We can all have our own focuses or our own individual ideas or our own strengths. But the overarching goal, yeah, we should all be on the same page, and we're not. And that's worrying to me, considering we've had 80 years at this now.
I think because you've got the whole talking in welfare language versus abolition. You've got that kind of stuff going on. You've also got activists saying that animal rights and veganism are not the same thing. That and I think again that's reducing veganism to what, you know, in the way that your film presents it. Obviously, that's a massive reduction into. And
again, just on that note, if that's something that you believe, that's fine. But you should be saying, hey, the overarching message is that we're anti-oppression. I personally think that there's a conflation when these two things, but that's my personal opinion on this. However, the overarching message hasn't changed. It's only your subjective view of it which has changed. And so why are we not promoting the overarching message as it is still? Why is the subjectivity, i.e. I don't think that this includes this? No one cares what you think. No offense, but they don't care what you think. They want to know what veganism is, and you're failing to tell them. And I think that's the part that we should work on going forward. We can all have our own interpretations, but what's the overarching message? It's bigger than your opinion. Tell the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I know that that's not a very popular opinion, but I'm not here to be popular. That's the way that it is. Do we want the world to be better, or do we want the world to think that we're brilliant?
There's no danger of you being popular, Andy. Don't
exactly.
worry about
that. But that's kind of like my motivation. I'm not here to make sure that my subscriber count hits 1,000. I'm here to make sure that the world sees some form of justice before I'm no longer around. That's the plan.
Just very briefly, I was very gratified you mentioned jokes. I was wondering whether the reason you did that is that you had in mind the fact that if you look at stand-up comedy, for example, that one area of harm that people are still allowed to joke about in our kind of so-called woke times is our use of our fellow animals. Is that what you had in mind?
Yeah, and I mean, it's all just in reference to the kind of pyramid of violence at the end of the day. Things like jokes, like men talking in the pub about women, for example. That's the bottom of this pyramid. That's where this begins. And because nobody says anything at the joke level, it'll escalate to the next level and the next level and the next level. And we see this all the time. And so even things like the newspaper saying such and such celebrity love rat, it's automatically demonized. Like rats have been established now at the very bottom of this chain. We've got an absolute adulterer person that's having a newspaper write an article about him, but rats are still beneath them no matter what. So these are things that we can actively look at changing. Yeah, absolutely. We can no longer normalize other animals in jokes, or we can no longer normalize oppression in jokes, because then it'll sort of go further up the pyramid. Jokes become banter, which becomes everyday normalized vocabulary, and that's what we're watching and witnessing now. So yeah, everybody can do something. Everyone's got the power to say, hey, I don't think that's funny, actually. Please refrain from using that language in future. It's not hard stuff, but someone's got to say something, otherwise it will never change.
Yeah, you do hear a lot of people using fellow animals in a pejorative way. I do often. I'll usually come back if someone says something like that, like she's such a bitch, or she's such a cow, or something like that. I can't even remember what was the last thing I said, but I usually will make some kind of humorous comment about it in order to call them out, but to highlight the fact that it's both feminist, it's both misogynistic, and it's speciesist at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's and it's trying to highlight. It's trying to highlight that, isn't it? And if someone says something about rats, it's what you got against the rats? What have you got against cows and women? Something like that. So you're kind of And just kind of highlighting the fact that because people it rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
Exactly. That's what I was about to say. You'll find with most people anyway, obviously there's always exceptions to this, but with most people, the majority, all they're doing is repeating the rhetoric of those around them. And so the first time that you challenge that, and say, well, what have you got against cows? What have you got against rats? Oh, nothing. I don't know. I'm literally just saying the words that other people say. And then all of a sudden, the fact that you've challenged it, the next time that they might go to use a cow or a rat, you'll be in the back of their head as a reminder, like, do I need to say this? Maybe not. And I'll think about it. But it's because no one's ever said anything. And it's just normalized culturally for them to use those expressions until the day that someone says, we can do better. Which is precisely why we're all here, right? Like, we all used to just act the same as every other member of society until the day that some information landed on us in whatever way it did. And we said, hang on, I can be a better human than the one that I'm currently being. I can make better choices than the ones that I was currently making. I can do better. And so we did. And that's all we're asking from other people. You get given new information, you get made to realize that something that you were doing or something that you were saying was having a negative consequence, and so you stop doing it. It's real simple stuff. I mean, most of you were taught as a baby that it's not that practical to urinate or poo in your nappy, and so as soon as you're able to stop doing that, you do. These are not things that we think are amazing. It's just basics. When you learn better, you do better, right? Well, you've now learned there's a victim involved in this situation, and there doesn't need to be. What are your choices going to be going forward? Are you going to continue to do the things that you know are wrong when there's an alternative? Or are you going to recognize that and be the best version of yourself that you can be? And I don't think that that's too sophisticated to have a conversation with anyone. You can have that with a child. And so, again, if there's an influence out there who genuinely thinks that veganism is too big or it's too sophisticated, it's a you problem. Stop lying to your audience and actually have the sort of, like, I suppose, decency for them to give them the truth and let them decide. But there's nothing more arrogant than you saying, I think my audience is too stupid to understand this. Which is
going back to children. Like, I actually think children are more open to this message than many adults, because adults are more set in their ways. They're more indoctrinated into the ways of society. They've got more, connections to their family and the way things are done, and the family meals and all of that stuff is way more entrenched by the time you're an adult, isn't it? Then children are much more open to hearing.
All the social barriers as well, like you've got obviously people you work with, you've got friend groups and all these different things. They're completely different when you're speaking to an adult.
Right. Nella, have you got something else, or should we move on?
I think you should move on. You covered everything. So.
Right. Very good. That's the right. All right. This is us again.
Spot the difference.
Wendy, are you going to say it, or am I going to say it? Urine and poo, remember?
Oh, the nappy thing.
Yeah, the nappy thing, yeah. Right,
well, there was
anyway.
a coincidence there, wasn't there? That'll probably go over people's heads because they don't know what we're on about.
Okay, so have you got anything to refer to, folks?
Oh, I've got quite a long list, but it might take us ages.
Yeah, well, we need to keep this relatively short as we could.
Yeah. There was just a great conversation going about language. So I was just kind of bringing up a few things that people were saying about. I think Deb and Alan were saying how they. I can't find them now.
Fancy you being interested in language.
The stuff that they were doing. Where are we?
43.
709. Oh, okay. I think. Oh, that Sally said one as well. There are folk at Camp Beagle who do focus on broader issues. I get postings, especially about Palestine and the PIP issue, but very rarely on the actual postings from the camp. So I think this is just about talking about. I think that was in reference to the comment that I was making about the overarching message and then different focuses within that. I think that was about that, Sally. But there were a few more.
Yeah, this is weird. I had something from Colleen, which was 643. and it seems
Oh,
to.
I had a 648
Oh
from
no,
Colin.
there it is. Yeah,
648.
is that the same as you, Wendy?
It might be. I thought mine was 648. I can go. Let me scroll back.
I think
In
part of the
time.
answer to this is the fact that people use animal rights rhetorically in the movement, whereas they don't use rights as a critique of welfare. So they use them interchangeably. So the way to get around that is to watch more Tom Reagan, where he shows how to speak about rights, which is not comparable with welfare, and it involves a critique of it. So that's where I'll go there, and probably the 88 thing that I mentioned right at the beginning, the opening statement by Reagan in the animal rights debate. There's 9 minutes of quintessential animal rights philosophy, which includes a critique of welfare as well. So that's where I go on that one. Was that the same as? Do you want to comment on that one, Wendy? Oh,
No, but I think I just checked mine, but I think it was. I can't remember why I'd done it now. But this is the ones that I was picking up was on the language. What about the use of they instead of it? That's because often, yeah, that's I think a really good one, Deb. I agree. He, she, they. They is a good one if you're not, especially if you're not sure of the sex. We don't know how they would identify their own genders and all that human crap. So, yeah, they is quite a good one. But also, I think Alan and Deb were just saying a couple of things which I've kind of scrolled forward
I've
to.
got an Alan one from 656. Is that the one?
No. Oh. So go with yours. Go with yours.
Well, first of all, there's this one from Jeremy, but I think this is probably something that's a little bit too complicated for us to address time-wise, but it is an interesting one. Whether people, when they hear the phrase empty cages, we want empty cages rather than bigger cages. Maybe for some people that, well, isn't that the same or something,
It could, because again, people are hearing what they expect to hear and they'll interpret in through their own filters. I actually, when I kind of borrowed from that idea, I actually changed it to demolish the cages when I gave my talk the other week, and I was saying until all the cages are demolished and all the sheds and the laboratories, rather than emptied, which I again felt was a bit more clear.
Yeah, that's still clearer if you say all use ended, I suppose. So that this is my final one. So this is Alan. Triggers his guilt. You see, that's the interesting thing, isn't it? The fact that, I mean, obviously that's not necessarily why you're doing it. Although I think a lot of activists think that triggering guilt is a good thing. I'm not so bothered about that, so long as they kind of think about the issue. I'm not particularly interested in creating guilt in someone else, because I don't think that's a very positive thing. But so Alan's saying that his brother-in-law hates the word someone for one of our fellow animals because it triggers the guilt.
I think guilt can be a positive thing. And I think guilt and shame are different. Shame can be quite toxic and maybe not that positive, but I think guilt can lead to reforming our behaviour, and so therefore it can lead to more positive outcomes. I do believe, but it depends. Obviously, we're not there to try to shame people, but I think if telling them the truth,
if you feel guilty, do something about it. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Right.
So the things that I will bring in were just really, really brief ones. Here it is. It was Deb was saying. Oh no, this was Alan. Sorry. If I'm working on vivisection, for instance, I will use that as a springboard to talk about all oppression. And I think Deb was saying a similar thing. I think it was that one. Yes, bringing animal rights and veganism into conversation with activists in other movements, and I think that's brilliant, isn't it? Like you can go into like a single focus issue campaign or a different movement altogether and still bring in the overarching message of anti-oppression and anti-speciesism and all that. So, yeah,
well,
that was it.
Nella, have you got anything? I think you're muted.
Nella's muted.
Yeah, Nella's muted.
Nella, you're muted.
Yeah, I think I've done it. No, I haven't. I can't. Yep.
Sorry, I was muted. I was saying there is a very interesting conversation in the comments, but if we address every comment, we'll never get to the end of the film. So I'm good for now.
Yeah, we should just do a marathon episode.
Well, it's been a good chat, and of course, because we're doing what we're doing this time, we're able to monitor the conversation in more depth. Because normally you kind of skim reading because you're talking at the same time. So yeah, so we're able to engage or at least register the conversation a bit more. So should we move on, folks, or is there anything else?
Yeah, ready to move on. I'm just trying to find that comment so I can take it off. Oh, well done.
It comes up with a box. Remove current comment. You know.
Oh wait, I didn't see that. No.
No, it always does that. If you move past it, it comes up. Yes.
It comes up. Okay, I'll look out for that.
Yeah. Wow.
Merci beaucoup.
Learn something every day. Right. Here we go. Yet again. So this is the last part, folks. You'll be pleased to know, probably. So here we go. Answer. Right, here we go. This is. I think it's coming up. Your part or section 5 and our part 3. Andy, so here we go.
Section 5. Activating others. Now that you see the truth, what will you do? See, veganism is the first step, but not the last, because justice is not passive. Justice requires action. It requires voice. It requires clarity. If animals are victims of oppression, then silence is not neutral. Silence automatically sides with the oppressor. So we must speak out. We must continue to educate. We must continue to activate others so that we can build a movement not of consumers, but of resistors. First, we all must understand the fundamental wrong, and that is not suffering, and it is not cruelty, it is use. Any use without consent is a rights violation. No exceptions. Secondly, we need to speak with more moral clarity. We need to refrain from talking about the treatment and begin talking about justice. We need to refrain from talking about less suffering and instead demand no more use. We need to refrain from talking about bigger cages and instead remind the object is no cages. There's no such thing as humane slaughter. It's simply unjust killing. We want liberation, not regulation. We want freedom, not free range. And we want rights, not welfare. But what if people push back? What about if they say, well, you know, plants have feelings. What about other animals? They eat meat. These are not real questions from real interested people. These are simply deflections. And the reason that they're asked is because these people have no idea what veganism is. They assume that veganism is a diet or a lifestyle or a personal choice, something that they can simply opt out of. But it's so important that we remind them, this is not about diet. This is not about health. This is not about any of our own personal preferences. This is a social justice movement with moral obligations.
They taught us to be polite, to be just like them, to stay small and stay quiet, to nod along and not disturb the order, disturb normality. But justice was never handed to those who waited, and peace won't ever occur by repeating violence. Liberation comes to those who disrupt the silence, not those who obey it.
It is about opposing all oppression. It is about refusing to participate in the violation of someone else's rights. When people understand that, they will stop asking, why are you vegan? And start asking themselves, why am I not? And that's precisely the shift that we need. We need to be creating not just vegans, but abolitionists, people who don't just avoid injustice, they actively oppose it, they actively speak about it, and they actively activate others to do the same. When they do outreach, there's no need for inreach. We don't create vegans who stop at food or think that this is simply something they can pick up and drop when it suits. We create vegans who understand the fundamental wrong. They're not consumers, they're liberators. They're not welfareists, they're abolitionists. Someone who says clearly, other animals are not ours. Their bodies are not ours. Their use is never justified. Their liberation is non-negotiable. This is how we grow. This is how we win. One consistent voice, constantly speaking the truth, activating and empowering one another, and another, and another, every single day until all of this oppression ends. Section 6. The call for abolition and liberation. Now picture this. A world without cages. A world without chains. A world without slaughterhouses. Without animal testing laboratories. Without any exploitation. Picture our fellow animals as no longer being seen as property. No longer being seen as commodities. No longer being seen as things to be used. Picture them free, not in cages, but in sanctuaries or in the wild, not behind bars, but simply under open skies, not owned, but liberated. Let's create a world where a mother cow never again has to be worried about being separated from her calf, and a pig can roll comfortably in the earth without having to be worried about concrete, or a fish swimming in the ocean will never recognize a net. A bird in the air will never know the sound of a gunshot. This doesn't have to be a dream. This doesn't have to sound idealistic. This is what justice sounds like. And it doesn't begin with reform. And it doesn't begin with better treatment. It begins with abolition. It begins with non-compliance. It begins with non-use. And it begins with you. Because veganism is not the ceiling. It is the floor. It is where justice begins, not where it ends. A vegan world is not a plant-based society. A vegan world is a society that has rejected oppression itself, that has torn down every single arbitrary line, whether that's species, race, sex, ability, class, all of it is gone. A world that still allows any animal use, even gentle use, is not a vegan world. A world that ends all non-human animal use but allows racism, homophobia, or any other tyranny is not a liberated world. It is just a different form of injustice with a different name. True veganism is the total opposition to domination, to ownership, to exploitation. It is the call for universal liberation, and the only way we ever see that world is by creating true vegans, people who understand and have connected with the why, people who live by those principles, people who carry the message forward with clarity, with courage, with conviction. We don't need any more half measures. We don't need any more slightly better choices. We need a movement that's consistent, a movement that says no more cages, no more chains, no more victims, not for food, not for culture, not for profit, not for anyone. A movement that constantly cements the idea that this is not a diet, this is not a trend, this is a revolution in values. So stand on the side of liberation, stand on the side of freedom, stand on the side of justice, and say no more, not in my name, not in this world. We can end the violence. We can end the exploitation, and we can end the oppression, but only if we speak out, only if we unite, only if we educate, only if we create other abolitionist vegans who create more abolitionist vegans who carry the truth every day until every cage is free.
A world built on exploitation isn't broken. It's working exactly as intended for those who profit from it. But those same systems will turn on you too if they haven't already. Oppression never stays neatly contained. It never stays quiet. That's why we can't either. That's why we are not asking for kinder or tidier versions of violence or injustice. We're demanding an end to all of it now.
This is the call. This is the moment. This is the movement for abolition. And it begins, as always, with you.
This was never about new and improved versions of oppression. It was about ending it, all of it, completely and indefinitely. Not someday, not when it's convenient, not when it's cheaper or easier or your friends think it's trendy. Now, go vegan, live vegan, refuse their systems, align your morals with your actions. And know this, liberation will truly begin the moment we stop pretending injustice can be done kindly. Peace will finally be known when we recognize we cannot evolve using violence.
Well done, Andy.
Thank you.
Well done. This was powerful.
Yeah, very powerful.
To try and get people to watch it now. That's
Yeah.
the part that I'm not very good at. I can make films, but I'm not very good at, putting them out to audiences. Marketing is not my strength. Maybe we should get some of the influencers to help with that part. That's their strength, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
I
That's why they could.
I love the fact that you make so clear that veganism is about total liberation, and that no one can be free while others are oppressed. Because as we all know, there is this ongoing conversation within the movement: the animals-only people, the so-called intersectionals, and the gap. And so I love the fact that you make this clear and you do not negotiate it. These are the true values of veganism, of course. I wonder though, is it enough for people to understand what veganism is about? Because lately I have this feeling about things in general, not only this movement, that people do not care, even when they realize that there is injustice happening somewhere, that something is wrong. They recognize it, they agree with you when you talk about it, but then they do nothing about it. And a blatant example is that at the moment we're doing this, there is a genocide going on. And most people around me agree that this is wrong. But then when I go to a protest, I don't see, a sea of people there. And I have this feeling that people say it's a shame, it's bad, it's shameful, it's unethical, it's whatever. But there is a tendency for people not to do anything about it, and I'm wondering why, and if this is a sign of this era more than in the past. And what does this say for this movement and for social change in general, and how how it's going to affect our efforts for liberation?
Yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of truth, sadly, to what you're saying. I think a key part of what the difference needs to be going forward is that when we're talking about some of the genocides that are going on, pardon me, a lot of people think, well, obviously, I'm not contributing anything to that. I'm not racist, or I'm not anti this. So me as an individual in the UK, I'm not doing anything towards that part. So there's not really any sort of like accountability on my shoulders. I can say, hey, I'm against this, but after that, I don't really need to do anything. Whereas people need to recognise that for as long as you're doing nothing, you're allowing this to continue. Your silence is consent. And so you don't have, I mean, if it is privilege that we're talking about, but your privilege won't change anything. You saying, I'm lucky enough to not be affected by this, therefore I don't need to talk about it, means that one day you will be affected by this, because the people that you're currently ignoring or avoiding will only last forever. And when they're not there, this system is coming for you, if it's not already. And so it's fundamentally vital that you recognize that even if you're lucky enough that right now this isn't putting a bullet or a gun to your head, one day it will, or one day it'll be you that they're coming for. It'll be your rights that they want to take from you. It'll be your inherent rights that will be stripped from you, and there'll be no one left. I mean, it's like the old-fashioned poem of like nobody came. Like this is where we're at. And so we're no longer at a point where silence is enough. You saying I'm against what happens in Gaza, but saying nothing, attending nothing, and allowing it to continue is you saying I have no problem with what happens in Gaza. And that's the kind of attitude that needs to be pointed out going forward. Silence is absolutely consent. Silence is violence. You don't have this opportunity to sit there on the sidelines and do nothing, but still say, I oppose this. No, you don't. If you did, your actions would mirror your words. And until they do, you don't oppose it. You're just silent, basically. So I definitely agree. And that's on us to sort of like hold people to account in this sense. Like, why aren't they there? If this is how you feel, if you're saying, I'm against this, I think that this is wrong, go and do something about it. Even if it's at the absolute least in having a conversation with those around you. Because that's where this begins. Most people are too scared to even call out or challenge the people in their life, let alone go to London and protest. What about your parents that are saying these racist things? That's where you want to start challenging this oppression. The people that are around you by saying, that's not okay. Because again, we're back to that pyramid of violence. We're at the very bottom of it. And unless you start challenging these things at the bottom, they'll soon reach the top. And by then it's too late. So yeah, the onus is on us to do more. And that includes vegans too, obviously.
I also think there's another element to that as well, that people do speak out and people do go to protests and people do go to Glastonbury and, make chants or make protests in that way, or people do write to their MPs, people do express these opinions, and then nothing happens. And it's normalized by the governments and the states, and then people do feel powerless, because it's like, well, what else can I do? What can So I think that it can work that way as well. And I think this goes back to sociology, and I know Corey Lee Wren would talk very much about systemic oppression, and that actually the onus can't always be just on individuals, because individuals, we have to speak out as individuals, but also there are bigger powers, and it's the systemic violence and oppression as well that we need to challenge. And I think sometimes it can feel very overwhelming as an individual, because these powers are so huge and it's so complex, that people can feel a little bit overwhelmed and think, well, what can I do? And now they're making, alliances with certain groups, especially here in the UK. They're bringing terrorist laws out, where if you stand for that group there, you're basically a terrorist. And so all this massive backlash is coming against civil, peaceful, non-violent protest. Even here in the UK, which is shocking, but not unexpected. And so the political landscape, I think, is changing. I think you can kind of feel there's a real shift going on, even with people who do care and do protest.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely valid, and I can't sort of dismiss any of that. And obviously there's a very real fear now also when you go and get involved in one of these things. However, it still kind of falls into the same brackets of the only reason that the government or whomever have got this power is because they're fighting 2 or 3% of the population. If everybody, and I know that that's very unrealistic, but if everybody, when I marched on Parliament, wouldn't have enough police officers in the country to arrest everyone, let alone do anything about it. But the problem is that doesn't happen. You'll get 2% that will go and march, and then you'll have 70% that go, oh, look at those do-gooders, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, you should at the very least be supporting them, even if you can't go. And you're not. You're chastising them, which only empowers these systems that tear them down. So it's like, That's where your input needs to change. I know that not everyone's not capable of going and putting themselves on the front line. That's absolutely understandable. But why the hell are you shitting on the people that are? Like, that's definitely something that you can stop doing, and that will help empower these people. But for the moment, that doesn't happen. They empower the police, they empower the politicians, they empower the systems that oppress people, and that's why it feels so disempowering, because the people who are stood next to you, or should be, are not. And that's definitely something we can all work on changing. Just because you can't necessarily go and actively protest, or you can't go and do these things, you should stop ripping shreds the people that actually are, because it's your freedom that they're fighting for. It's your rights that they're protesting for. They're not thinking, I only care about me, son George from down the road. It's your rights that are going to benefit from this protest, so support them at the very least. I think that's one thing that we can all do a bit more of, because there's some really terrible sort of like criticism, isn't there? Even for like the Just Stop Oil people. Like, why is the criticism always on the people that are protesting and not on the companies that they're actually protesting against? Do you not think if we looked at maybe some of these oil companies and the way that they act, that Just Stop Oil might not have to exist? Do you not think that we should probably look at why they exist as opposed to how they behave? But we never do those things, do we? The epistemology of things is completely irrelevant. It's not, oh, look at these guys moaning. You ever wondered what they're moaning about? You ever asked them what it is that they're concerned with? No. And that, I guess that's one thing we can do. Sorry, carry on.
No, and I was just going to say what you're just saying there about showing support and solidarity with others. That kind of bears out in what we're talking about in what Nella was just saying earlier about, you brought attention to veganism being anti all oppression, and there's no liberation, none are free until all are free kind of thing, because often there is pushback on that in the movement. And I understand where vegans might say, no, animal rights is about fellow animals. I don't want to focus on human rights things. I don't want human rights to cloud what I'm trying to focus on. And that part of it I can understand. I have some sympathy for that. If that's what people are seeing, it's like we're not centering. And I think sometimes we're talking past each other, because I don't think any one of us would ever want fellow animals not to be centered. Like, right. They are front and center of everything we do, everything I do, everything all three of you do, I know, and so many others who think this way as well. They are front center. But what we're saying is, in order to fight that oppression, we have to be aware that these oppressions are interlinked and interconnected. And then also, if other people are fighting other oppressions that are not linked, but are not focused on fellow animals, we don't shit on them, because they're in solidarity. That oppression is also linked to ours. So we might not focus on that, but we support and be in solidarity with that because they are connected. So I think often we talk past things as if we're on opposite sides. Actually, we've got much more common ground and much more commonality than we think, and that we would care to admit, because the world is so freaking polarized right now. It's like it's like no one can bear to agree with anyone anymore. It's like we're so looking for a way to be opposed to someone and to have a difference of opinion. It's like, why can we find actually where we actually agree and support each other in that? Because I think we'd be much stronger if we could do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just genuinely what you just said then, if I could sort of proposition all of the animals only people to do that going forward, nobody is asking you to change anything about what you do currently to include human beings. Just stop telling people that this movement excludes them. That's my only ask of you. Stop lying to people about what intersectionality is, and you don't need to do a damn thing different. I'm not asking you to stop talking about this, to go and campaign for this instead. Just stop lying to people about what intersectionality means. Stop telling them that excludes humans or any of those things, and we don't have to keep correcting it. But you're creating a problem that we have to fix. And then you get frustrated that we fix the problem by talking about these issues. And it's the issue that you've created by telling people that this doesn't include human beings. So maybe if you stop doing that and stop putting out the information, George, I'm talking to you. Like, if you stop telling people this information, we don't have to come along and say, that's wrong, here's the truth. So again, it's a case of no one's asking you to change what you're doing. But if you're not shitting on us, we don't have to defend it. So it's just something to think about going forward. No one's saying you've got to prioritize humans. Just stop telling people that they're excluded. You don't just ignore that sentence, and we've got no problem. We'll do our bit, you do your bit, and there's no conflict. There's only a conflict when you tell people this is wrong. And because someone's going to come along and say, actually, no, it's not, and here's the evidence to the contrary. And we go round and round and round and round and round and round and round. So, like, I totally agree. We're always going to have these different and polarizing views, but there's no reason to try and discriminate against the other one because they're not doing what you want them to do. Just recognize that you're moving in the same direction, even if you're doing different things. And I don't see what the problem is with that basis. That would improve us massively going forward, even as divided groups, wouldn't it? Because we're no longer wasting time on the other one. We're only wasting time on our audience. Well, it's not wasted then, obviously.
I tend not to waste time on all that stuff, to be honest. I just try and do my thing and speak from my own values and take my own course. And I tend not to spend a lot of time and energy on trying to correct other people, because I think the only way I can do that is by speaking my truth and going with what I think, like you've done with your film, is like that speaks for itself without having to go around and argue with everyone and make people, try and correct them, or do you know what I mean? I think create good, powerful, like, outreach, education, films, poetry, music, books, whatever you're doing, do that really well. Do it with conviction. Do it from a great vegan stance, abolitionist, animal rights message. Do that really well, and that speaks for itself.
Yeah,
and let that be your, that your stance in the world, really, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nella, do you want to come in?
No, I'm just still thinking of, about the film and the fact that Andy managed to cover, I will say almost everything. I think it's everything, but I will say almost everything, just in case. It's really good work. I think that, Andy, you managed to summarize everything that is this movement in this film, and clarify, the misconceptions about veganism, and really say what is important. And at the end of the day, the only thing that is important is not the only thing, but the most important thing is justice. And we should never stop talking about justice, no matter what injustice we're talking about, and who is affected. We should always talk about justice. And I really do not see how people think that it's effective to dilute the real, message of all this, just to make it easier, or more palatable, or whatever. I don't see why people think this could be effective. So I think that the film comes in a really critical moment, at a really critical moment, and well done.
Thank you.
Really loved it.
Yeah, I second that as well. Roger, you've been very quiet today. You got anything to add?
My one and only contribution to this section is this, really. Starts with Elsie Striglin, ends with Kathleen Janaway, Andy. So in terms of the vegan pioneers, everything that you've said today, and obviously the film, is pretty much in line with their values by any fair reading of the vast amount of work that they put out over those years. So how frustrating is it that your voice is seen now to be in the minority?
I don't know if, I guess, frustrating is the right word, because it comes with a level of expectation. Like, I didn't come into this thinking, you know what, I'm going to make a film and everyone's going to listen to me. Like, I knew very much the movement that I was releasing the film into. But I suppose the most frustrating part about a lot of it is we don't have a huge amount of history. We don't have a huge amount of, like, work to read through or things to listen to or whatever.
And so the small amount of history that we do have, I think, is very important that people learn and kind of, at the very least, familiarize themselves with. And yet we have the opposite. We have people that are not only not interested in it, we have people that genuinely say, I don't care what dead people said. And I'm like, the disrespect that's shown. You've joined their movement, the movement that they risked their lives to set up so that you could join it, and you can't be bothered to listen to the things that they've said. I mean, then if it worked both ways, why should you be in this movement? What qualifies you? You don't agree with the founders, you don't share their principles, you don't spread their message, therefore you're not qualified. Surely that's the thing that frustrates me the most. Like, it'd be different if you said, I've read through everything that they said and I disagree with this and these are the improvements that I have. But these people don't do that. They go, oh yeah, I don't care what they said, this is what I want to believe. And I just think it's just, again, it's just height of arrogance. And we're not talking about thousands of years of philosophy that they have to learn. We're not talking about like years and years and years of dissertations you need to read. There's a very small amount of information. It's pretty basic, it's pretty simple, and it's the absolute minimum requirement, I think, when you join a movement, is to learn its history. And nobody does that.
You've prompted a follow-up, which is, if you say they don't have much to read. Now, you're probably the person who's read more of it than most, if not totally. And so, in terms of if they did read what the founder stood for, do you think it's open for interpretation, or does that only come from cherry picking?
No, I definitely think there are things that are open for interpretation. I mean, there's especially the first decade or so of the Vegan Society. It's almost as though they show they're working out, is probably the best way to describe it. They're showing their understanding of the sums as they're working out the answers to them, because they don't know. They genuinely don't know. They're asking their audience what they think. They're asking for information to be sent in. And so they're shaping this philosophy and this sort of mindset through the Vegan Society, and everybody that's part of that is playing a part. And so I think obviously there's always going to be a level of interpretation, but we know what their key principles were. And I think it should never be forgotten that these people decided that the time to do this and the time to stand up for what was right was at a time when nobody would have begrudged them from saying, just worry about yourselves. There's some bigger issues going on here. Because that's what people say to me every single day now. And I've never lived for a world war. So the fact that they prioritised this, decided it was worth doing, worth risking losing their friends, their families, even their own lives for, should be the thing that we just show that little bit of respect and maybe pay attention to some of the things that they said. Yeah, I don't think it's much to ask. I mean, at the end of the day, you're more than happy to use the word that they coined. You're more than happy to be part of the movement and take the credit for being part of the movement that only exists because these people did that. So, yeah, show them a little bit of respect. It's not much to ask.
Apparently it is for some people. Right, so anything else, folks, or should we go? Right, okay, I'll take that as a we should go. So, Andy, can't say thank you enough. Well done for the film, and thanks for taking part in this director's conversation of it. And so, thanks a lot. And in terms of this is an unusual Animal Rights show. So we're about to do it all again and show this to the Animal Rights show audience. So that's going to be interesting. Right, I'm going to end that there in case people think that we're closing down, but we are closing down now. Thanks for being with us. This is like twice as long as we're normally on. So thanks very much. I do want to say that the Vegan Society have got a exhibition at the moment in Birmingham. Don't know where it is, but the details are on the Vegan Society website. I think it's going to last into August, but I don't know when it starts. But again, all the details there. And it looks at the history of the movement, although the Vegan Society do tend to invisibilize Leslie Cross nowadays. In fact, they have done since the 1960s, which is tragic. But the thing that caught my eye, and it might interest you if you can make it there or whatever, is the fact that they've got Donald Watson's ration book, his war ration book, on display. So I just thought that I'd mention that because it might be quite interesting. So that's it. So any last words, people?
I wonder what people thought of the film and thought of this format as well. I'm just curious as to how it was for everyone.
I'm not going to go through this stress again.
Obviously, it was quite long by the end, but yeah, thanks for sticking with us if you managed to. Appreciate that, and thanks to Andy again as well for such a powerful film and for coming on and commentating. Can't even speak now. Commentating on it, etc.
Well, I mean, the truth is, we couldn't have done this show without him. So yes, thanks, Andy.
Yes, thanks, Andy.
Last word, Nella?
Nothing. If you enjoyed the film, thank you for being here, everyone. And if you enjoyed the film, download it and let's help it travel far and wide.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And with that, folks,
share.
Until next time, we shall bid you au revoir and see you again.
Bonjour.